So last week at about this same time, I was talking about the whole, older guys going for much younger babes. It was a 33-year-old guy who was talking about how he prefers babes who are between the ages of 21 and 25 and shit. And we even spoke about the Leonardo DiCaprio story, which had recently resurfaced about him wanting young babes and not dating them past the age of 25. But now the question that we ask is, what if we flip the cards around and it's the dudes who are the young ones? And normally we've been talking about the whole, this guy is busy looking for younger babes and shit. But what if we flip the cards and everything? We switch the gender scale a little bit and asked ourselves, what about the younger dudes that are going for or are, targets for these much older women? We should probably start asking that question as well, because it's not like it's just the older dudes that are going for younger babes. Even the older women are now going after younger dudes. And this is sort of backed up by a clip that I saw from tonight's conversation cards. And it was Brittany Renner who was busy talking about this whole idea. And, she's a 30-year-old woman and she was talking about, dating an 18-year-old guy. So let me play the clip for you and then we can sort of get into this entire thing. So here it is.
There's a 12-year age gap is what we're talking about. So if I'm 30 years old and I'm talking to your son that's 12 years younger than me, what's the problem?
Do you understand?
Can I answer that?
Go ahead.
My problem with that would be is that you have more experience than he is, and I would want him to live his life a little bit more before dealing with someone that's seasoned. I have 2 children, 2 sons.
I have a son as well. So, I think even when I think about Jay-Z and Beyonce, whether you're talking about me or Jay-Z, what's the difference?
I wouldn't encourage my son to date someone that's 12 years younger than him either. So immediately, the conversation went to the comparison. I hold both parties accountable.
Right.
And I wouldn't like either of that, any situation like that.
That's fair.
All right. So very interesting sentiments over there. And I know I didn't do this with the previous episode where I was talking about age, but I'm going to do this right now just to sort of clear the air a little bit. Now, I'm not going to include the whole, she likes grooming young dudes or, the older people are trying to groom the younger ones. I want to avoid that one because I don't think that a massive majority of the people that engage in such relationships are looking at it that way. And not unless if it's like an underage story, I don't see why I should really bring it up. Because when you're an adult, I don't see why it is that you're past the age of 18 and someone's still talking about grooming. Because I think the moment you realize that you're an adult, in as much as yes, you have freedom, you also have responsibilities, not just to the environment and to the people around you, but also to yourself. And that responsibility that the older person has, the younger person should have as well. Even though the older person has a much higher responsibility, the younger person should also have responsibility at least to a certain degree. So all that said and done, now I actually kind of liked the clip. It was a particularly short clip and, I don't know how the entire conversation went. I didn't go looking for the entire clip because of time and everything. But I won't lie, there were a couple of interesting sort of tropes that I sort of noticed. First of all, people like leveraging incest as a mindset whenever it comes to these discussions. And yes, I can get, there's a massive age gap in some of the stories that people talk about, but a lot of times people like bringing in the whole, oh, she's young enough to be your daughter, oh, she's old enough to be your mom. People like bringing up those things to sort of kill the entire conversation and make the older person look bad. And by all means, even though it wasn't particularly used with this clip, it is something that you hear quite a lot. And that's something that I'm not a particularly big fan of, because I feel like that argument point is usually just meant to pull the other person down. It's kind of the same way people like talking about the whole weaponization of age on women, which is something that I was talking about when I was discussing the whole age and dating thing earlier on last week. But that aside, there was the thing of, talking about such topics and then using your kids to sort of gauge the entire thing. Or, I have sons, so I wouldn't want them to go through that. It's not something that I particularly, dismiss. I think that does come from a pretty good place because at least it makes the situation a little bit more relatable. But sometimes people can use that against the other person. But I feel like the weirdest part was how Brittany Renner was like, oh, I also have a son. Come on, kid is a year old and you were busy messing around with younger niggas. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you care all that much. Just because you have a young son doesn't mean that you'll make a particularly different decision as opposed to if you don't have one. You get me? But anyways, that aside, I feel like I've sort of tried to dwell on it a little too much. Now, the whole conversation of younger guys having a thing with older women hasn't been something that I've seen publicly talked about up until about a couple of years ago, because I remember the first public conversation that sort of came up about this was when Lisa Ann was with some first-time freshman that was like an NBA draft pick who was like 18 years old. And they took pictures together. Apparently there was a selfie of them in bed, and this had like its own level of public uproar to the point where I think the NBA released a statement or gave like stipulations on stuff that draft picks are supposed to do, or like young NBA people are supposed to do, or some shit. I'm not entirely sure about that story, but it sort of had some sort of ramifications that I think also bled into the NBA. And this was something that wasn't particularly talked about before, because most people hadn't really seen it as something that was publicized up until around that time. Because this was the first time that you were finding that instead of, these supposedly successful, these potentially successful guys running around with younger model-like babes, this was the first time where it was a case of these younger potentially successful guys are with older women. And it's not just older women, but older celebrities that they sort of looked up to and possibly had crushes on. And the thing is, it's not like it's something that's very commonly spoken about, not unless if one wild story sort of just pops up. Because the last time I heard something of this sort, besides, this clip, was a couple of months ago. I think it was like 2-3 months ago, where some woman on Twitter had apparently spoken about this young dude that had approached her. Apparently, they used to know each other with the son back when they were teenagers and shit. And when he had come over to the house, what she had told him was, "Oh, you look kind of cute. You look like you'll make a very handsome man. And I'd probably shag you if you are older. But if you come back in 10 years, we'll see if we can make something happen." Or something of that sort. So I think it's like 10, 12 years later now, which is sort of right now, this guy comes back to this lady. The lady can barely remember this guy. And this guy sort of introduces himself, says, "Oh, I used to hang with your kid back when we were like 14, 16 years old. And you told me if I am interested in like 10 years, I can come back and, maybe sort of might just be able to make something happen." And she got quite a lot of abuse and insults online because some people were saying that's textbook grooming. It wasn't right. But on the other hand, there are some guys who are like, if Shorty is fine and the guy decided to wait, what's wrong? They're both adults, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, I feel like it is becoming a lot more normal, because there was also a discussion on the same exact topic about a year ago when this guy in Kenya called Guardian Angel was supposedly dating this 50-year-old woman. This guy was like nearing 30. He had been having a particularly successful, I don't know if it's a media or a music career, and he had started dating this woman that was like 50. He liked her. They ended up getting married, and they were like, "You know what? We love each other. Screw you guys." Although I'm not going to lie, Shorty was looking particularly good, but that's sort of besides the point. Now, usually whenever people hear such stories, there's normally about two main questions that sort of come up, and they're pretty gender-based and they're pretty simple. Why is it that these older women are running for younger guys, and why is it that these younger guys are actually going and doing the thing with these older women? And the thing is, I have sort of tried to do a little bit of research on this, and I think I might have come up with the best answers for both. Now, for the guy's side, that one seems a lot easier because, guy, particularly young, so it shouldn't be all that hard. But the women part seemed like it was a little bit of a toss-up. Now, at first, I thought, probably they're just interested in the sex. But there's something that Lisa Ann said in an interview when she was being asked about, her looking at dating much younger guys. And what she said was, and I quote, "I feel like if dudes could be with Victoria's Secret models, that's how I look at athletes. I'm 42, now 50, and I'm looking at 18, 19, and 20-year-old guys. They're little specimens. Their bodies are beautiful. They're at the beginning of their lives, so they're still excited, naive, and simple. They're not negative yet. There's no ego yet. They're not jaded. They're fun." End quote. And when you kind of look at it, it does kind of make sense. It does kind of make sense. And with my very minimal experience with, having a thing with an older woman, I can probably say that this is particularly accurate. And the thing that I have sort of noticed with older babes, which I think I have mentioned on this podcast before, is that they know what it is that they want from what it is that y'all are trying to do. Because if she's trying to shag, she's just trying to shag. unlike older guys, because I know there's someone who's going to flip the gender card and be like, oh, but can that be the same thing with older guys and like younger women and shit? Of which, yes, you could say that, but the problem is with a lot of older guys, what might start out as just shagging can very easily turn into I want to date you, or I want to marry you, or I want you to have my kid or some shit. And while that doesn't account for all older guys, it does actually account for a good chunk of them. Because there's a lot of guys that didn't have that kind of emotional comfort, and they shag a couple of times, and that kind of bond develops over time, and all of a sudden they want to turn it into something else. Now, I'm not saying that babes are also immune to that. It's just that I feel like more babes that are much older will probably sort of know what it is that they want. They know that they just want to shag, and they're not trying to turn it into anything else, at least from the minimal experience I've had and from this statement over here. Now, with the younger guys, I feel like that one's a lot easier to explain, because we want to shag, and obviously there's the whole validation of, oh, I'm shagging a much older person, so I'm technically in some ways more mature, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, it's just shorty wants to shag, I want to shag, and we know exactly what it is that we want, which is we're just shagging. There's no trying to date and everything, and that's probably what we'll go for. Now, the issue comes up when someone's talking about dating, like seriously dating a much older woman, which, I'll be very honest, does present a couple of issues for guys. Now, first of all, there's the whole power dynamic, who has more power than the other? Is the woman going to be more submissive, or, is that going to be a bit of a struggle? Are you guys going to act like you're on equal levels, but the woman dictates shit? Like, those questions are going to come up. And on top of that, there's the other issue of, you can't be in too many of her social events, and it's not like she can be in too many of yours, because it's not like a mid-30s woman will go to a party full of 21-year-olds. Like, she will feel like a fish out of water. Also, the 21-year-old may not necessarily feel all that at home when he's sitting with her girlfriends, quote unquote, at a public event. And that's kind of where my stance is based, because in as much as there isn't particularly anything wrong with two adults, regardless of the age difference, coming together and choosing to date, in a situation where the babe is much older than the guy, I don't really see it going that much further than them being particularly casual. Because the moment you try to get serious with the entire thing, that's when stuff starts to fall apart. Because on the one hand, there's the social pressure from the both of you to sort of break up. And, the society is not going to be particularly welcoming of the entire thing. More so, say, the environment that's closest towards a young guy. Then this guy might be forced to mature a lot faster, or this babe might be forced to hang back on a couple of things that she might want to go all full force in. Then there's the power dynamics that come with it. Who gets to lead, even though the babe is like, say, 10, 15 years older than the guy, does she still get to act submissive towards him? Like, those are some of those questions that you'll probably need to sort of sort out, because it's not like you guys in a partnership are always going to be on the same equal level. One person has to take the lead of the other. But more so than that, I feel like for most guys, it's more fantasy in terms of, wanting to be with an older woman than it is the desire to actually seriously date them. Now, when a lot of us young guys think about the idea of dating an older babe, we want an older babe, but we also want one that's hot. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of the babes that have become much older, that are in their late 30s, their 40s, hell, even their 50s, still look pretty good. Because you look at Lisa Ann right now, she still looks particularly good. This is a woman who's about 50. And a lot of guys my age and even slightly younger probably used to bust a nut to her. So, given the chance to be with a fine babe like Lisa Ann, why wouldn't we say no? Look at Toni Braxton. This woman should be in her mid-50s if I'm not wrong, and on the looks department she can compete with a lot of 20 and 30-year-old babes. But at the end of the day, is it something that you'd want to have long term? Like, not in a bad way, it's just that a lot of guys would picture being with such a babe when they were kids, and there's the whole childhood fantasy and shit. But when you look at reality and moving it on and actually turning it into something that's long term, I don't really think a lot of young guys would actually want to do that, or probably should be trying to chase that, because there's a lot of things that they'd probably want to do that they'd probably be better off doing with a much younger babe. Although, then again, that is just my stance on it. So I might be wrong about this. So I want your thoughts on it. DMs are open on Facebook and on IG. It is at Breaktime on Westside. On Twitter, it is at Bagak the D. That is my personal handle. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.